Hi, this is zebracode.io, and we are on lesson 12. We're looking at homework solutions, and so we'll be looking at problem number 5. In lesson 12, we're learning about writing, reading, and appending to files, specifically CSV and text files. And problem 5 is write a program that reads the movies.csv file and determines which movie, number 1, earned the most revenue, and number 2, has the longest run time. So hint, for movies with revenue, make sure there is an actual value in there because some of them will be blank, and so we'll need to trap for that. Now, the first thing that's good to do is to look at the movies.csv file and get an idea of what the data encompasses. There's, a lot of movies here, probably close to 1,000 movies, and it has revenue here, and it has runtime minutes here. And again, notice in the revenue, some of them are blank here, so we'll have to trap for that. So let's set up our development environment. We're going to first save our file, and we're going to save it within our homework folder, lesson 12. And once we save it, we can start writing. We're going to have 2 files open as always. We're going to be editing our code using idle, and then we'll be executing our code from the command prompt and switching back and forth. So what we want to do in this problem is find the max revenue and max runtime for all the movies within the IMDb database. So I'm going to import CSV, and then I'm going to have a variable. I'm going to call it file is equal to, or is assigned the value of open our IMDb folder.imdb CSV, and we're going to open it up in read mode. Now we can do a dir just to verify that we have the right name, and in this case it is imdb.csv, as we can see here. Sometimes I've called it movies, and so if we rename things, it's always easy just to check quickly that we make sure we have the right file name. So I'm creating a new variable called rd, is assigned the value of csv.reader. This is the method within the library that we've imported with the CSV file, and we pass it the file name. In this case, it's our instance of the file name, which is the variable file. So next, we want to look for the header, and I'm going to create a new variable called head. Head is assigned the value of next. It opens up the first record. RD, again, is the output from the reader, and we're going to look for a header, and if there is none, it will return the value of none. We can print head, and that's our variable of the header. Let's go ahead and save this, run the code just to verify that we are accessing the correct CSV file. We'll do Python pb5.py, and we can see these are all the header of columns for the data that we have in IMDb database, the CSV file, rank, title, genre, description, has a lot of other information, including the 2 we want to focus on, which is runtime and revenue. So let's comment out the header because we don't need that anymore. And now we can start iterating through the RD, which is our instance of the output from the .reader method. So for line in RD, and now we can, as we iterate through the entire file, we can search for the maximum runtime and the revenue. So let's do a couple things. First of all, it's always good to focus on the columns that we are interested in. In this case, it's title, and that's in the 1st position. Runtime is in the 7th position, and revenue is in the 10th position. We can open up the CSV file to verify these, but it's important to know how our data is laid out if we're going to write code that extracts or analyzes that data. The next thing we need is a couple of variables. Because we're going to want the max rev and the max run time, I'm going to create 2 variables called max rev and max run, and they're going to be initialized to 0. So now we can iterate through. We can start going line by line in the file, and I can say if x7, position 7, that's the runtime. So what I need to think about is if this runtime value is greater than the current value of max run, then I know it's larger, so I will be storing a variable called max run, and that's going to be assigned the value of x position 7. So this is going to, each time it goes through, it looks for if the runtime is larger than the current one, and if so, it saves it, and then it checks the next one until we finally get through all of the records. We should have the last one. Now, because everything in a CSV file coming in is a string, and I'm trying to do a numeric comparison here, I need to convert x position 7 into an integer. So this little bit of code here should be able to iterate through every line, find the longest runtime, and then we can print that value out. So let's go ahead and run this code, and we get an error that x is not defined, and that's because I often use for x in RD, but in this case I use for line. That's the local variable, so I need to change these all to line instead of x. So that's the variable that we're iterating through, and that's the variable that exists within the for loop. So now if I change everything to line, and I run this code again, we should see the longest runtime, and we get the longest runtime is 191 minutes. So that's a little bit over 3 hours. That's a pretty long movie, and I would be interested to know what is the name of that movie. So let's create another variable called max run title. This is going to be the title of the movie that has the longest runtime, and initially it's going to be, I'll initialize it to the empty string, and here we'll set max run title to equal to line, and the title is in the position 1, so I'll put the number 1 here representing the first position. So now I can, instead of just printing out 191, the max time, I can actually print out the title. And the title is going to be a string, and so I can concatenate that with a string called is. So it's going to be the title of the movie is, and then it's going to have the runtime, and it's going to have the minutes. So this will be the longest runtime in minutes. I need one more concatenation here, so let's put a plus sign, and then let's run it and see what we get as far as what is the longest movie. And I get another error, and it shows me in line 14 where the error is. Errors are going to be very common. We can work through them, and obviously max run is an integer, and so I need to convert that to a string because I'm doing all these concatenations within the string here. So now this should be a little bit cleaner, and when we run this, we get Grindhouse is 191 minutes long. I can put an extra space here after minutes so that it's a little bit cleaner, but we get the idea. We have a movie, and it's over 3 hours long, and it's the longest movie in our entire database. So the next thing to do is let's try to find the max revenue. And we can basically use these same 3 lines of code for something very similar, but instead of focusing on the 7th position, we will focus on the 10th position, which is the revenue. And so I'm going to do if integer line 10 is greater than max rev. Now notice I'm using max rev instead of max run at this point. Then max rev is going to be assigned the value of integer value of line 10. And then also we can create another variable called max rev title, just like we had max run title, and we'll initialize it to the empty string here, just as we did before with max run title. So if we run this, it should be very similar to what we had before. It's the same idea, and we can put up another print statement at the very end. It's going to output, in this case, not the longest movie, but the movie that had the highest amount of revenue. And as before, we're going to have to convert this to a string, and then we can put some finishing touches as far as the string at the end. And so what we really want to say is this movie earned this amount of dollars and in revenue, and it was the highest amount. So it's $1 million. These represent millions of dollars of revenue. So we get hopefully a nice clean message that shows the longest runtime and the highest amount of revenue. And we get an error about integer, and it shows the data is 333.13. So really, I was thinking of integers, but the revenue needs to be in a float value. And so we can do that by taking max revenue and making it a float value here. And so instead of an integer, let's convert this to a float. And similarly here in this line, let's change that to a float. And now if we run this, we should get a little bit further, and we get a different error in this case. It says can't convert a string to a float. And we remember because we had some revenues which are blank. And so those, you can't take a float of a blank value because that's improper. So we have to do a little bit of data cleanup. We have to capture that. We have to make sure there is a value in the revenue column. And we can do that by saying if line position 10 is not equal to the empty string. Because if it is the empty string, if there's nothing in there, then we don't want to count it. I can take these 3 lines of code here and indent it. And so now it's only going to focus on if there is some data in the revenue, and then I'm going to try to find the max if there is data. If there is no data in there, I'm just going to skip over it and assume basically that revenue is equal to 0. Now I run the program, I get Star Wars, The Force Awakens earned $936 million. So that's a blockbuster. I would expect some type of movie like that, good name recognition to earn the highest amount. So what have we done while we looked at problem 5 of the homework? We're focusing on CSV files and text files. We can read them. We can write to them. We can pen for these files and allows us to persist data. In this case, we looked at a movie database with a CSV file, and we found the movie that was the longest movie and also had the greatest amount of revenue. Thank you. This is zebracode.io.